or some of them are desperate for e-voting because they feel they have, well, that's really where the good business case is. Yeah? If you have a lot to count, then automation certainly helps. Yeah? And we will see what that does to some concepts later. Well, the easiest fix to the issues of e-voting suggested is why don't we just keep physical copies? Like, why don't we just scan the ballots, or why don't we just have a paper trail coming out of the e-voting machine, and then we can recount? So paper trail and also the digital pen that was attempted to be introduced in Hamburg follow that concept. And that obviously allows an independent validation of the result, and you can manually count the receipts if you want. But there's a number of issues coming with that. For example, what triggers the recount, which polling stations get audited, who decides that, who makes that decision, when and where is the count conducted, and who has control over the physical copies until the recount. And well, it can probably fix the auditability issue, but it will not fix the transparency issue. Because if you want to implement the transparency piece, you would need to recount in the polling station immediately after the election. Nobody would be allowed to take the ballots away and count later on demand. And that basically kills the business case of e-voting, because if you have to count anyway, then why won't you use e-voting in the first place? Well, and if you just restrict your recount to a sample of the ballot of the polling places, then you can probably maintain your business case, but then you introduce other issues. For example, in Hamburg, the authorities suggested that the recount should be a fixed percentage of 1.5% of the polling stations, and that should act as a proof of the correctness of the election devices, of the digital pens, for once and forever. But there's obviously a number of issues coming with that. The sample would need to be truly random to prevent fraud in the polling stations where you don't audit. And the sample size would need to depend on the outcome, because the closer the election result is, the less votes you need to flip, and the more you need to audit to actually find any tampering. So which sample size ensures a high probability that you can detect fraud? That's an easy problem for a race with just two candidates, like a US president election. You just look at the number of votes you need to flip to change the results, and you can then make an estimate how big your sample needs to be, and what the probability is to actually detect any tampering with that approach. Now, it's more difficult in a multi-party, multi-coalition scenario. For example, in Germany, we have a 5% threshold for a party to be elected. And in Hesse, in 2008, the party, the Linke, just passed this threshold by 3,600 votes. That's about 1 vote per polling station. And that's actually not very much and difficult to detect. And then when you normally would need 25,000 votes to flip a seat, in this scenario, there were 53 seats for the two conservative parties, CDU and FDP, and there were 57 seats for the other parties, which are more left-wing. And so you would need to switch 3 seats to change the outcome of the election. But actually, if you just flip these 3,600 votes for Linke, then they would not make it into the parliament, and their seats would be redistributed to the other parties. And then the CDU-FDP would have won the election with just 1 vote per polling station. There's other issues with keeping physical copies. what do you do if the electronic results and the audit don't match? Which result is used? City of Hamburg suggested that the electronic results should be binding rather than the hand count. So why do you then audit in the first place? And what do you do if you find a mismatch? Do you have to increase the sample size? It's all things that people have not spent much time on. Also, if you create your physical copies with a printer, you introduce a tempest problem, and it gets very difficult to protect the secrecy of the vote. Also, companies like NEDAP said they would never introduce a paper trail because the printers fail and create paper jam. Well, that's probably not our issue, but the vendors. That's one that was created or mentioned. Now, would it not be much more elegant to introduce transparencies through cryptographic methods? And the idea basically is we use cryptography to ensure that the election is to ensure the election integrity, and we provide the voter with an encrypted receipt, so the voter can check that the vote is cast as intended and counted as cast, but he still cannot prove to other people how he was, how he voted. So he can't sell his vote, and he can't be subject to coercion, which is Nötigung. There have been a number of proposals over the last couple of years. So bingo voting is not the first one. Prêt-à-voter, 3 ballots, scratch and vote, punch scan, integrity, bingo voting, and vote box are some of them. There's detailed information on each of them in the internet, so just have a look in the internet on more details on this. I'm going to touch on some of them, on 3 ballots, on punch scan, and on bingo voting. They have, all proposals have one in common, that the ballots receive a unique ID, so that's really a big difference to a normal paper election. You have individualized paper ballots or individualized ballots, and this ID could be random or it could be a serial number, and the voter receives a receipt which contains his vote in an encrypted form and the serial ID. All encrypted votes are published, and the voter can verify that his vote is on the list and is on the list in the same way as he casted it. There's some immediate issues that arise from this approach without even looking at the details of these concepts. Can a verification that my vote is counted as cast replace a verification of the entire election? Probably cannot, because it doesn't protect against ballot stuffing. So if you can't observe where the votes come from, then people might just inject additional votes. It does not allow external observers. The only observing persons are the voters. And it also creates the issue, how many voters need to cooperate to actually unveil fraud? And can the cooperation be sabotaged? For example, if I know somebody will not check, can I flip his vote? For example, if I put a waste bin next to the polling place and people who don't want to check just throw the receipt in there, can I collect these receipts and now have an idea which votes I can flip? Or can I make up an organization which pretends to check the vote on your behalf and then collect receipts and tamper with the votes which are related to these receipts? There's other immediate issues like who protects the encryption from being decrypted? So is my vote really secret, and for how long? Who controls and protects the encryption keys? Is the serial random number on my ballot box really, or on my receipt really random, or does it contain any information on the voter's identity or on the vote casted? And coercion might not require that the secret is really broken. any doubt in the secrecy might enable you to force somebody to elect in a specific way. Who ensures that the receipt is just issued to a single voter, and that people who who have voted the same way don't receive the same receipt, and then you free up serial IDs, which you can then use to vote somebody different, for somebody different. So that's all general issues which are common to all the concepts and which need to be answered by each of these approaches. The first one is really for warm-up. It's probably not even, or Ronald Rivest doesn't even pretend it's cryptography, but it has many of the concepts already in there that are used by the other approaches. The paper ballot has 3 columns, or ballots, and the idea is that you mark every row for every candidate. You make one, you mark once, and the candidates you choose, you mark twice. So first step is you mark every row randomly, and then your candidates you mark twice. And then there's a trusted checker machine which ensures that the vote is valid. So you put that vote into that machine, and it validates the vote so that you only casted as many votes as you should, and that you have a mark, a tick in every row. And then you decide on one of the 3 columns or ballots which you want to keep, and you get a copy of that. And you can take the copy home, and you separate the 3 other ballots and you put them into a ballot box. And the votes are counted as usual, and then obviously you get 3 n votes for n voters just by the random pattern you start with, and then you have additional votes which are due to your selection. All the ballots get published on a bulletin board, and then you use your receipt and you compare it with what's on the bulletin board, and then you can verify that at least a third of your vote is counted as you casted it. And the other 2, you assume that whoever organized the election doesn't know about which of the 3 ballots you took, and so they wouldn't be able which one to tamper. But it's if the voting organization of this checker machine doesn't know which of the 3 receipts you've chosen, then you have a good chance to detect any tampering. Now, Rivest says it's not a cryptographic voting protocol, but however, it basically uses a kind of voter-generated random key. The pattern you start with can be implemented for paper-based and electronic elections. It's really intended, I think, as an academic discussion paper rather than a serious proposal for use in elections. It's not coercion-free. You can sell your vote, or you can be forced to sell your vote, forced to vote in a specific way, because the voter has control over the pattern he makes, and he can, in a typical Bundestag election, for example, with 10 candidates and 10 parties, you have 20 rows, and you have so many possibilities to make a random pattern that you can tell somebody, I'm going to mark my ballot paper like this. And in a polling station with about 1,000 voters, it's extremely unlikely that then somebody else will have any of the 3 requested ballots the same just by accident. There's more issues. It requires trust in the serial numbers being secret and truly random. So it puts the secrecy of the election at risk. It requires trust in the checker and carbon copy mechanism. because if you know which receipt is chosen, which of